Welcome to the Infinite Wealth Podcast. I'm Cameron Christensen, along with our co-host Anthony Faso. In today's episode, this is going to be the beginning of a series of interviews that we're going to be doing, showcasing clients and their thought process and how they got started on infinite banking, how they're using their policies and the issues that they've encountered along the way, just to give you guys some idea of how other people have been using infinite banking. Anthony, what's a takeaway or two that you had from this episode?
I think there were a couple, and I'm going to start with how Sahil had shared his story, which is very interesting. Had the number one license of a marijuana dispensary in Montana, and how he really fell into that. It wasn't part of something he had planned. It was there. He just was open to an opportunity, and so he took that first step and into an unknown territory, and now it's grown from something he thought maybe he could just get this license and sell, but then when he found out he couldn't sell it, he ended up growing it, and now he has 3 or 4 dispensaries in Montana alone and doing some in other states as well. But I thought it was pretty interesting about being open to that opportunity, but also once he had that opportunity, that's when his network came in. He had got some support from attorneys that he had known to help give him the confidence and some of the tools to help him grow this business. Then, as he shared about IBC from a client's perspective, it was interesting. Honestly, it's a little nervous because you're hearing. I remember meeting Sahil almost 10 years ago, and then here he's telling the story from his point of view, which is kind of interesting to hear his perspective. And, he did throw in there that I had said that I'd thrown in, hey, when I was a CPA. And so I thought it was kind of funny to hear him say that. So, and I'll say, I just like to hear it where you're hearing about infinite banking, not from agents or people who are selling it, but from people who are actually using it and living it. Cameron, what were some of your takeaways?
Big takeaway I had was, man, Sahil's honestly, he's a great guy. Joy to hang around with. And it's funny is because when you hang around with him, you're going to hear about infinite banking, right? It doesn't matter whether you want to or not. He's out there, he's sharing it, he's excited about it. And it's done a lot for him. And it's cool to hear kind of a client testimonial. And I think that goes along with some of the things that we've shared in the past, as far as, hey, when you learn about infinite banking, is you almost share it out of obligation more so than anything, right? The way that we phrase that typically is that it's caught, not taught. And so it was a pleasure to hear him kind of share his story and the way that he's been using it. And hope you guys find value in that. Again, enjoy our interview with Sahil. Great client. He's been a long-time client, almost 10 years, I think is what he said, and very happy with infinite banking. So I hope you guys enjoy this episode.
Take care.
Welcome to the Infinite Wealth Podcast, where we teach clients how to build wealth and create passive income without the risk of Wall Street.
Sahil, hey man, we are excited to have you on today's podcast. We are excited to be sharing your story with some of our listeners. And let's get this thing started by you telling our listeners a little bit about yourself.
I am a serial entrepreneur. I started becoming a business person while I was still in college. My first company in college was a computer company that I started, and I got going pretty good at that. We were doing computer rebuilds and repairs and reformats and things like that for a bunch of businesses in town. Some of them were some attorneys that I was friends with. Some of them had some other businesses like coffee shops and things of that nature. And then I was also doing political science in college. And then at the time, when that was occurring, there was another person that was like, hey, we're starting these licenses off in Bozeman, Montana. They're going to be these cannabis licenses. We should go and get a cannabis license, and maybe we'll be able to sell it off and make some money. And so we ended up standing in line to get these cannabis licenses. And this was in 2008, before anybody had even really started the venture. And this was only in the medical space, not the recreational space. And no one showed up. So we were issued a license between me and a couple friends of ours. We ended up with 3 or 4 licenses. And it turned out that this particular license, the way they had it structured, was that it was non-transferable. and it was non-sellable. Basically, you couldn't sell it or give it to anybody else. You had to pretty much operate the license yourself. If you chose not to operate the license, it was just put it back in the pool and given to the next person. And so that was kind of like our starting point. We're like, okay, well, do we want to get into this business, cannabis? What do we know? How are we going to do it? And at the time, like I said, I was working with these attorneys who were also in they're just very connected in the town. And they were so well connected that they were like, hey, we can probably get you a facility to get your business going. And so they were able to help us negotiate terms on a lease and get everything going and looking out for our best interests. So we were able to get started in the cannabis space. And then once we were started and we were one of the first people in the cannabis space, business kind of just became took off. It was we were able to learn some stuff, and then we were able to kind of compile that into more information. And then we went from the first year, I think we were in that location for a while, and the business was doing decent. And then the next year we decided to start learning how to actually cultivate the plants. So we hired another person and got a space and started cultivating plants, and then kept on the dispensary game. And then there was a lot of changes in the laws and things went back and forth, but we were able to keep the cannabis business going successfully the whole time. And it was probably around 2014 that we were consecutively doing that, as well as we got the opportunity to expand the business into the Las Vegas market. Some people had approached us, including my cousin, and said, hey, there's some people that want to get started into Las Vegas market. They're, have some knowledge, they have some money, but I don't think they know all the stuff that they need to know about cannabis, and maybe you can come and help them real quick. And so I was coming to visit all the time, and he came down and we met them, and pretty much on day one, they were like, hey man, I think you're the missing ingredient for our operation in Nevada. And so we want you to move you down to Nevada like immediately. And I was like, hey, we have a pretty big operation in Montana. I can't just move, but I do have a lot of people and a lot of connections. If you guys want to do this right, I can bring down a group of people from Montana and we can get you guys established and going pretty quickly. And so they came down and we came down, they agreed to it, and we got them going, and they were the first operational cannabis dispensary in Nevada as well. And so they were operational pretty well, and they still are using our techniques and our ability and the way we built out the grow house and a lot of the things in the cultivation facility, as well as their dispensing facility. And then we've been doing that ever since as well. So we have the Montana cannabis operation. We have a operation in Nevada for cannabis. And then in the meantime, we decided there were some people and they said, hey, the only reason you're so successful is because of cannabis. If you were in a different industry, maybe you wouldn't be as successful. Cannabis is really easy to operate in. Well, it actually turns out that cannabis is probably one of the most hardest industries to operate in my opinion, comparatively. So in the meantime, we decided to do some classes and learn some more stuff. And I started to do some home renovations as well. And that's probably in between that time is when my business was making a lot of cash flow, and so we were like, hey, what should I do with this cash flow? What are we going to do with this money? I could just put it in the bank. We could do something else. That's probably when we started researching IBC. And so we were researching IBC in the sense of just like, hey, what to do with cash flow? What do, other people do? And we kept coming across the internet with like, oh, a lot of people are using this infinite banking concept, and then that some people were using it. Then we ran into Nelson Nash and his book, the infinite banking concept. And I read the book originally and was like, oh, wow, I really want to get into this concept. Who could do this concept for me? And so me being from Montana, I reached out to a bunch of insurance agents in Montana. And that was one of the problems, was nobody really understood the concept. People sold life insurance, people sold whole life, all the different types of, universal life, but they didn't really understand how to make the policy work, the aspects of the cash value versus, the death benefit and all the other little nuances of how to set the policy up. And so I just kept researching. And then I was like, oh, well, maybe we'll look for some people in Vegas because I'm in Vegas anyway right now. And so that's when Anthony came about, he was like working and doing his thing, and he had the infinite book on his desk and everything. And I was like, okay. And I think we got into, there was like 2 people, I think, at the office that worked there. So it was a flip of the coin on who we were going to pick. And at that time, I guess Anthony looked better and younger than the other guy. So I was like, well, maybe there's a chance here. And so we ended up getting a meeting with him in his office, and we were doing that for the Infinite Wealth. The first day I went in there, I was like, oh man, this guy seems very nice and straight edge. I don't know, maybe he's going to work himself out. He was explaining the whole concept to me and all this stuff. And I was like, okay, great. And he was like, what do you think? And I was like, oh, let me think about it for a while or whatnot. And so I went home to think about it. And mostly I was thinking about whether or not I was going to pick Anthony. And one of the things that was in my mind at the time was, what is this guy going to say when I tell him I'm in the cannabis business? Do you think he's going to take well to it, or do you think he's going to freak out? And so Katie, my wife, was like, well, let's test him. Worst case, we're going to do something else. It's like, okay. So I think he called or something. And I was like, yeah, I just want to let you know that, or maybe I think I was in his office now that I think about it. And he was like, yeah, do you want to do this? What are you thinking? Like, I gave you all the steps. How are you, what are your processes? And I was like, well, I'm totally, ready to move forward. The only concerns I had was, I'm in the cannabis industry as well. How do you feel about that? And he took really well to it. He was like, I have some friends that are in the cannabis industry. It's, pretty big in Vegas. I've done some CPA work, or my friends have done CPA work for some other people in cannabis. And I was like, okay. So then from there on, we kind of hit it off. And so we were able to do that. And so we started putting some of that cash flow away into the life insurance policy, probably when I first met Anthony. And that's how I was able to grow our real estate business, was taking a lot of value from the whole infinite banking concept and how to, re-amortize some of our stuff. And then when I was able to put the money in, we were able to pull it out and start helping not only fund the cannabis business at such a heavy rate, but also then some of our real estate businesses. And so, yeah, that's kind of like the start of my journey right now. That's kind of what we do is, so I'm still pretty heavily involved in the cannabis business, and we still do real estate pretty well. Fix and flips and things like that. I'm also an investor in some other businesses. We're a part of this real estate group that we do, we've done some museums. We're involved in this museum concept that's been pretty good, the Paradox Museum. And now we're moving into some other concepts. We're going to try this trade school concept as well. And, so I guess more business and more adventures.
Sahil, that's quite the introduction, right? Mm-hmm. You covered a lot of stuff in there. I was going to go back, and you talked about once the dispensaries kind of got up and running, you had some cash flow and you started looking at opportunities. What was it about infinite banking that first caught your attention? Do you remember?
The infinite banking, it was just like, okay, well, at first, we weren't just like, okay, here's some, let's just say if you have $10,000, right? And you're like, okay, well, am I just going to reinvest this into a building, an asset, whatever it may be? We probably just didn't have what we were going to reinvest it into set aside right away, right? So the infinite banking concept was, hey, we're going to be able to it's like a bank, but before it can become a bank, we have to kind of get it functioning. And in order to get it functioning, it's going to take some time. And so in that meantime, you might as well just start taking that extra cash flow and putting it into this system. And as we build this system up, we're going to be able to then take those loans out, whether it be for equipment or some other needs for your dispensary, right? And I think initially when I had first gotten started in the concept, we needed some kind of equipment. Maybe it was $50,000 or something like that was the total cost. And we probably had about $50,000 laying around in the bank, and instead of originally just saying, okay, let's just spend it on the equipment, we said, okay, well, let's start up the life insurance policy. We'll start putting that $50,000 into the policy over the next corresponding months. I think for me, it was $5,000 a month or something like that. So it was over the next 6 months or 8 months, we're going to be pretty much putting that whole amount into the policy. And then we can buy the piece of equipment that you're thinking about buying, which was the same. But now we're going to have the banking concept going, and I think for a lot of people, that was a hard thing. So that was the most attractive thing, that there wasn't anything specific that I was looking to get. It was that we could take that money and start putting it into this system and then utilizing the money out of it going forward.
So I got a kind of a follow-up question, but a lot of times when people are getting introduced to infinite banking, one of the things that they stumble on or kind of is a negative that I would say is the slow start to a policy. Being kind of an entrepreneur and, having started several businesses, what's your point of view? Or what's your take on that? Because I'll share kind of the feedback that I typically get from entrepreneurs once you give our answer, but I'd love to hear it kind of firsthand, right? As I feel like entrepreneurs look at that slow start a little bit differently.
Now, there's two aspects to that slow start, correct? Like, in my opinion, at least, one would be like, let's just say if you had a regular job or whatever, you can probably only have so much income coming in. But me being an entrepreneur, like you were saying, or anything like that, the slow start, I mean, it just typically depends, right? Like, I think me and Anthony were able to maybe accelerate the timeline due to the dumping in of cash, right? So, like, for example, if your business already had something that was necessary to purchase, like we were going to purchase I'll just make it simple, a delivery vehicle. Delivery vehicle is going to cost 45 grand. We could go get it financed, right, through the thing. Typically, maybe we have some money sitting around in our bank account. And so we just accelerated that process by dumping in extra cash early, quickly, and with that extra cash, we were able to utilize the policy faster for that first initial purchase of whatever equipment we needed. And then we can pay the loan back, but it is typically, there is a little bit of a slower start. I felt like mine was not as slow, maybe because I already had things that I was buying. I just instantly started looking at the policy and saying, hey, I'm already buying things. My business is buying things every day. It needs something, instead of just buying it in cash. Let's just take that cash and reroute it through the life insurance policy and buy it, and there is, I know you guys know this better than I do, is like the MEC line and all that stuff. But typically, if you can get the policy in pretty high, you can put a good amount of cash in there and start pulling it out pretty much, in the first like 3 to 6 months. And that's not a terrible start, like in my opinion. So I think there's a lot of people that, maybe we're only going to be able to put in like $1,000 or $2,000 a month or something. Well, then that's not going to, be usable quickly. But if you're going to start dumping in 5 or 10,000 a month, then you should be able to finance a small project, $20,000, $30,000, $50,000 relatively soon. And that's only going to accelerate the value coming back.
I agree with you. And I appreciate you sharing that, because I think entrepreneurs, when they look at the slow start to a policy, is that they've started businesses in the past, that they know there's got to be some sort of outlay to kind of get this thing up and going. And most entrepreneurs, to be honest, don't bat an eye at the slow start. They know it's just part of the cost of doing business. And so it sounds like you had a similar mindset there. So thanks, Sahil.
Yep. Now, Sahil, when the way we design your policy, I mean, everybody has a different situation, and yours is in particular where we didn't get the policy on you. We ended up getting on your parents. You mind explaining kind of why we chose to go that road?
Yeah. For me, typically, I was just looking at it, and death is probably unavoidable at some point, and so there should be a payout on the life insurance policy. And so we were kind of saying, well, hey, if that's the case, then why not, gain some windfall from our folks first, and then we can insure ourselves second. And so, we started the policy up on my mother first, even though we may not be getting like the full cash values if we would have started it on me first. But at that time, we did a dual prong approach, in my opinion, where we got my mom started and we were putting in all the extra cash flow there. And then on me, we just did the term policy so that we could get, evaluated at a good health, have the larger possibility, and then convert it later into whole life, but while maintaining my parents' for ongoing cash value method. And that's where we're getting all the loans from, because typically, the same thing as you guys know, like as you're using the policy and, make a giant hole, let's say, because you're investing in real estate, you're investing in your business and all your other little adventures that you may have, that, in the unforeseen case of death, that there would be a hole for that windfall to actually accumulate into tax-free without it becoming a problem. And so we just said, hey, there's a good chance that our parents will probably die before us, so why not get them going first, since they weren't using infinite banking concept to begin with, my parents are immigrants, so they barely made it to America. I'm happy that they were able to do what they have done, and they've done a really good job for themselves. So, I feel like it's necessary for the next generation to start learning all the different concepts of how to go further along.
Now, Sahil, I got to imagine your inner circle or people you hung out with probably had no idea about infinite banking. And then here you go, I'm putting all this money each month into whole life policy. You probably had that noise or them chirping in your ear. What are you doing? Well, did that happen? And if so, how were you able to stay focused?
I think we started the show off with, I started a cannabis business in 2008. I think my folks were like, what are you going to do? And you're still in college? Are you sure? And I was like, I don't know. I guess, we're probably all young, but I was able to, for me, I think it's maybe different than others where I don't typically have to do what everyone else is doing, and what everybody else says doesn't really affect my choices. I'm able to kind of make my own choices my own way, but I will do the research and the ability to learn the concept. And I don't know if this was true when I first met you. I probably didn't know the nuances, like all the different little pieces of infinite banking concept, but I feel like I was able to tell you in basic, like, okay, this is what I want to do. You were probably the only person that knew what I was trying to do because you'd done it before, where when I was explaining to so many other agents, they were kind of like, huh? And they were like, we don't do that. And that's not how these policies work. And we're not, this is what you want to do. And it was like, okay, no, this is not what I want to do. Go to the next guy, And so doing that research, I feel like I had a foundation or a base of infinite banking concept. And I'm also able to then present that case or base to people that are trying to explain to me, oh, hey, this is why I'm not going to get a policy, or this is why I'm not going to do this, or typically, and I think one of the reasons that maybe I'm different too is when we were just even at your guys' event, there were so many people that I had spoken with that were like in that boat, were like, I'm not quite ready, or I'm not going to get started, or I'm not. And I always had a reason of like, no, you guys should do it this way. If you don't have all the cash, well, let's get you a term life policy. If you don't have this, let's do this. Or if you already do have a business, then it's like, why aren't you doing it through your banking policy? And so I feel like I was always able to convince people almost the other way around, where they're like, I think I need to get a life insurance policy, And I'm like, yeah, you totally should. But then, the point of is like, okay, are they actually able to go out there and get it? And sometimes, that noise, you have to check yourself, right? You're like, oh, I have this insurance policy. Is it doing what it's supposed to be doing? Am I working it right? Am I, not working it right? How's it working? But I told you earlier, I was a part of that investor group, and I'm part of two groups. One is we invest in things, and the other one is a learning group, FINAC. And what I did learn out of both of those groups was typically almost every single wealthy person in any of those groups all had life insurance policies. They all were using life insurance policies somehow to then, leverage their wealth or take loans out against their wealth. We recently in FINAC, we're learning how to do, they call it the income amplifier. And it's, you take this loan out typically, and then you put it into, Prosper, this other little thing, and then we move the money back and forth. And, initially the guy was like, you're going to have to go to the bank and go get, what do they call it? A line of credit. Yeah, HELOC, a line of credit. And he's like, unless you guys got life insurance, and then you can just pull it from your, he calls it his security vault, basically. And I was like, yep, I'm already set up on that, so we were able to just pull money out of the policy and start up his program because we were already set up. And so almost typically I've realized that there's so many different times when I'm in advanced financing or things like that, where almost everybody has life insurance. So it's just like goes to, check and say, hey, dude, you're probably on the right path. Everyone else seems to be doing, and I'm not saying typically like, oh, do everything everyone else is doing, but typically other successful people seem to have life insurance and are using it in some type of way, and so I feel like there's something to that.
So Hill, you mentioned a lot of good stuff there, but one of them was making sure that you're using the policy to its full extent. You've got several businesses. Can you give our listeners some examples of how you have used the policy?
Yeah. Well, so, not only do I have a policy, Katie, my wife, also has her own policy, and, we supplement her policy. And so just recently she wanted to buy a coffee shop. Coffee shop was for sale for, I don't know, $20,000. I think she negotiated down to $13,000. We pulled out a policy loan from her policy, bought the coffee shop and everything else. She ran the coffee shop, started making payments back, and got, her 13,000, I think, put back. And she was able to run the coffee shop for a year or two. And now she still has all the equipment because we just moved it to a different location. She could choose to sell that equipment or keep it or whatever she may do. But that opportunity came up and she was well prepared to take advantage of that opportunity right away. Typically, I think just recently what we did was, I was telling you in my class, we needed like $20,000 to start this little Prosper account. So where we were giving out $20 loans, and there's like a whole little technique in it. Someone else was teaching us that technique. But once again, we used the account to pull the loan out to fund the thing immediately. And then we were able to just slowly put the money back into the life insurance policy from our payments that we're supposed to do in the class that they were teaching us. But at least it was there right away. Another thing we've typically done is I used it to buy equipment at my business. We just typically just bought some LED lighting at the cultivation. Instead of getting a loan or whatever, we just used the policy, pulled out a loan, started paying some payments back, and then we were able to make that happen. I think I use it almost typically maybe once at least a month, where there's probably some kind of event coming up. I think, when we were investing in the Paradox Museum, which they just opened up here on the Strip in Las Vegas, I'm an owner of that Paradox Museum. The way we got the money out was the life insurance policy. I just pulled it out, and now they're giving us a dividend payment every month for when the museum is making money, and I'm just taking the dividend payment and putting it back into the policy. And so, just going back and forth, I use it like consistently all the time. Usually mostly for business or work related. I don't think I've ever done too much on it with the personal stuff, because I'm not, I just don't know exactly how I'd pay it back personally. But typically it's usually to finance any kind of equipment, large purchases, small purchases, or any kind of new business purchase or investment that we're thinking about doing. What other ones have I just done recently that I feel like we've done? I don't know if we bought a vehicle on it or not. I think we were thinking about buying a vehicle, but I think we ended up getting a better percentage just through the bank. So we just did it that way for the car. And then at any time we could pay it through the policy, or we can not. And so we were just like, hey, let's just see how it goes. So typically, the other part that I do really enjoy, my policy is also in the trust. So the trust is the owner of the policy, the trust is the user of the policy, and then it helps me able to fund anything that's related to any of the businesses, because the trust is involved in all of them. So
that's quite an exhaustive list. This is kind of a two-part question. I see that you're using it quite a bit. So I would say, what's something that you do like about infinite banking? And then conversely, what are some things that you don't like about infinite banking?
The things that I like about infinite banking, obviously I don't know if everybody has the same experience, because, it obviously matters on who your team is and everything. And with us, we use, Anthony and Becky, and with us and Anthony and Becky, that just works really easy for us on me being able to get a loan. I just email Becky and she takes care of all the details. And then
awesome.
So there's just no real work for me to be done. So I really appreciate that part. And it's pretty easy to pay our policies back and everything. It doesn't seem like there's much annoying paperwork, and typically, and it's pretty safe and secure on that portion. The few things that, I guess sometimes is just like getting everybody on the same page for infinite banking sometimes is difficult. Okay, maybe your accountant doesn't understand it, or doesn't understand how to make it a write-off, or that you can typically take this and you don't have to pay taxes on it, and so you then and that also comes with knowing how to use your policy really well, or also knowing the details of infinite banking. So I think like there's a part of it where it's, you can give somebody the tools, but you also have to teach them how to use the tools. And then sometimes you also have to teach that person's team how to use the tools too, right? Because like everybody from like my secretary and everything, they now know, but I've been using it for so long that people on my side of the team do know how to use it now. Typically they'll be like, oh, Sahil, can't we just take a policy loan and buy that real quick? I'm like, yeah, we probably can, you know. And so they're getting better, at least all the people that are on my day-to-day team. Have I convinced anyone to buy life insurance that's on my team? Not quite yet. I'm working it. But everyone just seems like they don't have enough capital, and I just feel like they just aren't visualizing it themselves. You know, I feel like they are using that money in a way every day, and yeah, there's going to be a little bit of loss when you put it through the life insurance policy to get it activated, and you know, you're also going to be paying for those benefits and such. But you know, I think in my opinion, it's worth it to get it rerouted in there. And there's going to be a little bit of a annoyance maybe, and a little bit of costs associated with it. Like some money is typically going to get moved out for having those features, but that's also what's going to be saving you with the death benefit later. Right. And so those are the things that typically take time to build and can be a little frustrating at times, just because you're like, oh, I got to make that payment again. But you know what we did typically was I just had a loan out that was big enough on my company that the interest only payment now is large enough just to make the payment for my monthly payment on there. And we're just saying, hey, it's an interest only payment. And so we're making the payment that way through there. I don't know if that's helpful for other people or not, but
well, you know, interest, you'd mentioned payment, right? And it really defines, you know, when you're putting money back in your policy, the question is it a payment? Well, I guess we're talking about premiums.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Is it a payment or is it a deposit?
Yes. Correct.
Right? And oftentimes we think of it as a payment because we have to write that check, or the money's leaving our account. We have to realize it's leaving one account we own and control, and then moving to another account we own and control. So, and I'm just pointing this out just to try to get people to think of those a little differently. If anything, I think it's more of a deposit, or if anything, a transfer. You know, when our mind hears payment, we think expense, and we want to stop expenses as soon as possible. But when we think about it as a deposit, you know, we want to get as many deposits as we can as possible.
Yep, absolutely. And that's the mindset too, is it is more of a deposit, however you look at it, because it's still just going to go into that other account, your banking account.
So I'm with you there on that one. Is right. Jessica and I have been doing infinite banking for a while, but even to this day, when we've got premium notices that show up, right, is I do need to remind her that we're just moving money from checking savings over into our policies. And so I totally understand that.
You know, I think at the beginning, like we've talked about, the slow start, you know, we put in $1. We don't have access to the entire dollar. That's temporary. It's only of the first couple of years. When you've done it for each year, it gets more and more efficient. And typically at year 10, you know, if you even with the PUAs, you put in $1, typically it's growing by $1.50. If we have dropped the PUAs, I mean, you can put in $1 and it's growing by 2 or 3. So I just wanted to make sure if somebody's listening and is new to IBC, the slow start is just at the start, right? It's only at the beginning. On that that topic, Sahil, what would you say to somebody who's on the fence about infinite banking?
You know, I guess I've met a lot of people that I still haven't been able to 100% push into the banking concept, but I feel like their mental block might not be just banking. It may be, you know, entrepreneurship or other things in that case in general, you know. And I just feel like for me, there was just no reason not to do infinite banking concept. Or, you know, I guess my question to them would be, well, what are you going to do with the cash then? You know, what is the plan? Is it a 401k? Is it you know, another, you know, whatever, Roth IRA type of program. But I guess all those programs that when we were looking into them, I just didn't want any kind of government interference, and that's what I noticed about the life insurance policy that was different than everything else was, okay, typically there's not very much government interference in how we are going to typically use them day to day. And so I'm like, okay, well, we're going to just do that. So some people that are on the fence, I feel, are just like, well, hey, I just don't think they're going to do anything. If they have a plan like, okay, I'm already going to do a 401k or this, or I'm going to do that, then I simply am just like, okay, well, I think it would be smarter to start with the life insurance first, unless you're getting like a match from your employer. But even if we were, getting that, maybe there's another way. But I just look at it as you're in control. You already have cash coming in. We already all typically have expenses and things that we need to buy anyway. What's the difference in buying it? We're just changing the way we purchase some of the items, on a day-to-day basis to allow it to grow and come back to us instead of the bank per se. And so, and just like you were saying, typically I just try to tell people like, get started as quickly as you can, because it's going to take, X amount of months or years to get it fully running. And so what is the delay? Some people, the delay may be, the payments, and we were kind of discussing that. Well, is it a payment? Is it a deposit? It could be, looked at as a deposit. Is it, hey, I already have some cash flow. Can I put it in here and I can just buy whatever I was going to buy? But instead of buying it, through there, I just buy it through the life insurance policy, because I do feel like that also allows you to get started a lot faster than you normally would, because as an entrepreneur, there's just always something that you're going to be buying in your business. And why not just funnel it through the life insurance policy? So if you're on the fence, don't even look at it as your own money. Look at it as the money from your business. It's already going to be buying whatever piece of machinery, equipment, a lease, whatever it may be. And we're just rerouting it. And you may have to add a few more dollars to get it paid the first time, like we're saying, because there's going to be a little bit of money missing, but it's going to be overall worth it. Because you're also, that money that's missing is going to give you that death benefit support for your business too. So if there's any debts or anything on your business, like me, if I do typically die, then Katie would still have that death benefit to pay up a lot of those remaining debts. So there would be no debts that would then go to her. That's, I think, my opinion. I don't see a reason why not to start, I guess.
I think, Cameron, we had talked about this on the prior episode, that infinite banking is caught, not taught.
Yeah.
Right. And so sometimes when we're trying to teach people or explain how this works, like they're not catching it. Right. But
yeah.
Sahil, let's
freezing here. We're about to wrap it up, but
you tell me.
Up. Yeah,
I don't know what you can see on your side. We're almost there.
Yep, it's catching up.
Gotta wait till Cameron fixes his hair and
check. Looks like we're close.
Okay. All right.
Sahil, man, I know I appreciate kind of your insight, and I know that you've got a ton of insight not only on infinite banking but just business in general. Being a serial entrepreneur, are you open to people reaching out to you? Right, if somebody has a question about infinite banking or just entrepreneurship, can they reach out to you?
Of course, absolutely. You can find me on Facebook, Sahil Mehta, or on Instagram, Sahil Mehta 1888, just like it is in the back of my glass right there. Yeah, I'm open to help anybody. I love helping people. I love helping people get, started on infinite banking concept. Maybe you need just some basic questions. Maybe it's some questions that, you don't think that these guys can answer, that I can answer, that might be different. Reach out to me at any time. So
awesome. I appreciate that. And then I know that you do have a podcast that you're working on, man. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, we're just getting started on the podcast. It's going to be The Entrepreneur's Edge. We're hoping to get entrepreneurs, their edge of business, or, whatever it may be in life as well. I feel like sometimes in order to be good at business, you also have to know a little bit about relationships and being able to communicate with people, because that's very important. I think without communication, everything just does not work, and if you can't communicate your point of view to the other side, then it just is very difficult to get the results that you want to achieve, not only in just business, but maybe it's in your, personal relationship, perhaps, or other things. And I feel like, being able to talk or just ask some questions to some other people and maybe get some real insights, not just some typical yes answers. They might be some hard truths, as you guys put it. There might be some things that you don't want to hear about yourselves. A lot of times I've looked at a lot of business people, and what we've noticed is that the truth may be in the mirror, if that's a way to put it correctly. They think that all the problems are everywhere else except for where they are.
I wonder if that's why Cameron's always looked in the mirror, because he's looking for the truth or the perfect hair. I don't know.
One of the two. Which is it, Cameron?
Probably a little bit of both. In that same note, what I would say is that the idea behind a podcast, right, is communication, but also community. Right. I think that's one of the things that we're trying to create here by our podcast, is pushing content out to our clients and other listeners and letting them know that, man, you know what, if you came across infinite banking, you're out there on your own, that you're not the only one doing it. Right. Yeah. And so I think that's why we appreciate you kind of opening yourself up to maybe some of our listeners, because, people assume that if they call us, they're going to get one side of the story. But, somebody that's out there practicing it, right? You guys can reach out to Sahil. He'll tell you the good, the bad, and the way that he's been using it. So I appreciate that, Sahil. Thank you.
And just to be clear, Sahil is not paid for coming to this podcast. He's just he's just a happy client. And I'd call him a friend, and he's passionate about infinite banking, which, I find when people really get into infinite banking, they do get passionate about it and they want to share it to others, which Sahil has been doing, and he's extending that offer. So we thank you very much, Sahil.
You're totally welcome, guys.
Sahil, thank you very much. We will make sure that we've got your social media links, Facebook, Instagram, and then we'll also be sure to push out your podcast when you get it out there. Make sure our listeners are aware of it. But thanks again, Sahil. Really appreciate you coming on the show today.
Absolutely. Can't wait to have you guys on my show as well, and bring me on for another episode.
Yeah, we will. That sounds good. So yeah, when you get the podcast going, we will have you on.
All right. And then, thank you guys so much.
Our pleasure, Sahil. And go make it a fantastic day.
Take care.
We will. Bye. Have a good day, guys.
See you, buddy.
If you like this video, I know you're like this one. And if you want to learn how investors use infinite banking to increase their returns and lower their taxes, check this out. And if you have some questions and want to see if infinite banking is for you, hop on a discovery call with us. Link for that will be in the description.